Good evening. I'm Jamie Good, the Workplace Mental Wellness Coach. And this is week one of the Struggle Well Read Along. I'm really excited to do this. It's my first time doing an official Facebook Live, so I'm hoping that everything goes okay. Try to get some lighting here rigged up to make it look a little brighter than usual. And I'm really excited to be doing this and digging into this book. I'm very kind of digital focused or based in the way I approach my life and tools. So I actually got the Kindle version of Ken and Josh's great book, Struggle Well. Let me see if I can put that a little closer there. So I hope if you are following along this week and the next 7 weeks, that you will get your copy as well, either digital for Amazon or Kobo or whatever other reader you might use, or just a physical, actual paper copy. And I think that this book is going to be really exciting to dig into. I'll just show this again because I love the kind of subtitle that they have there. Maybe not super easy to see there, but Struggle Well, Thriving in the Aftermath of Trauma. This is something that really grabbed my attention when I heard about the book because a lot of people who suffer trauma and the after effects of trauma don't usually think of thriving. A lot of people think of surviving, and they use the kind of survivor language. But I think this is a really interesting way to look at something that most people look at as, well, it is a negative, something that happened in your life that is negative, but that you can experience post-traumatic growth and that you can thrive and you can grow and learn based on the experience and some skills to help you. So as I said, I've not done this before. So if you want to comment or say anything while I'm doing this, I believe that there is a little comment section there that you can write in, and I will be able to see your thoughts on the book as well. And any questions you might have, I might not be able to answer them, but I know that Ken and Josh are fully supporting this experience and this kind of series. And so if there's a question that I get that I can't answer, I'll make sure to pass it on to them and then make sure that you get your answer in good time. So let's talk about what the read along actually means. This is just an idea I had. I guess I'll step back a minute, about a few months back to September when I went to a conference in down in the States, and it's called BIF. The Business Innovation Foundation holds this conference that I was invited to, and it was down in Providence. It was my first time there, and one of the speakers was Ken, one of the co-authors of this book. And he started talking about the work he's doing with the military and people who have PTSD, and how he has Boulder Crest Institute that he's helping to run for people with PTSD and their families to go and experience growth and experience, learn ways to deal with the situation, etc. And I remember sitting and listening to Ken and seeing his slides and seeing post-traumatic growth on a slide and thinking, I need to talk to this man. And so I immediately after he was done, I went down behind the stage, so to speak, and to talk to him, to tell him what I was working on, that I was diagnosed with PTSD about eight or so years ago, and that I have decided now, as you see, as I call myself the mental wellness coach, to help people with mental wellness, or to achieve mental wellness, to learn tools and learn skills that can help them, achieve that. So I'm just going to like it'll be really quick here. I'm going to put on my phone just to make sure that I'm not missing comments. Sorry, this is, as I said, new to me. So I want to make sure that I don't miss any comments in case they are popping up on the screen and I'm missing them. So again, hopefully I see what you write. This is new for me. So I went and talked to Ken, and then I found out about the book. I found out about what he was doing. I talked to Josh over Zoom, really excited to hear about the work that they're doing and how they're helping people. And then I thought, I want to read this book because I think it'd be helpful for me. It'd be helpful for the work that I do. And then I thought, like, why should I read this by myself? maybe there are other people that are interested in reading about it too. We can have a little community around the book and learn together and be a supportive community where we share what we learn, share our favorite takeaways, for example, talk about what we maybe put into practice from the book, and basically just share and connect. So that's how this read along idea came. It's not necessarily read along where I'm going to read the book out to you every week. That's not my plan, but more to say that each week we'll focus on like a different chapter, and then we'll have a discussion about it. We'll share some thoughts, some ideas about it. And as this is recorded, if you happen to see it after I'm live and have things to say or add, I will, of course, be checking. And as I said, if you have questions or anything, I'll make sure to reach out to Ken and Josh. So I think the way that I've kind of set it out, I hope will work well for everybody. If you have any feedback, suggestions, ideas on how I can make this even more applicable, more valuable to you or anyone else who might participate, I'm always open to hear what you have to say. Like I mentioned, this is my first time doing this, so not really sure the best way, but I figured that I would have one chapter a week, this week starting with like the introduction up to the book, and then go from there with each chapter. So next Wednesday will be chapter 1, where hopefully between now and next Wednesday you are able to read chapter 1, and then in next week's read along session on Facebook Live here, you would then be able to, say what you thought of chapter 1. So hi Anna, thanks for messaging me there. Now I know that this is working. This is awesome. Thank you. So the kind of the way I thought about it is that we just give ourselves a week to read the next chapter, and then we would then get on Facebook Live and have a conversation about it. You could put some comments in the chat there to let me know what you thought, what your biggest takeaways are, and that we'll learn together. I think it would be great, and I think that listening to what each other take from the book would also add to our experience of reading the book. So I'm excited to get started. Like I said, mine is a digital copy, and so what I have done as I've been reading through it and reading the introduction is I've just kind of done the highlight feature on my Kindle and put down and kind of grabbed some of the pieces that stood out for me. And so I'm always going to make space for you as well to put in the comments, or even now or after, what stuck out for you as well in the book. What was a thing that kind of hit you in a certain way, or made you think, made you reflect differently, made you learn something about yourself or the way that you deal with the trauma that you may have experienced in your life. This book has lots of great reviews on Amazon. It has a really good intro that I actually really enjoyed learning about Ken's kind of background in this and how much experience in that he has. And so the first thing that stood out for me, which I'll just pull up now in my notes, is there's this one thing that I thought was really interesting. The question is, how can we ensure that we enjoy the good times and wring every ounce of value, strength, and growth out of the bad ones? It's such a great perspective, because we will sometimes have these bad situations happen to us. We'll have bad times happen to us, like something that has triggered PTSD, for example, in someone, or who knows what could happen. And we will often just look at these things as just bad things and bad times and bad experiences. But we won't think, as it says here, how can we wring every ounce of value, strength, and growth out of these bad times and bad experiences? And I read that and I go, that's a really awesome perspective, but I don't know how you do that. And so that's why I'm looking forward to digging into this book to learn what Ken and Josh have learned over all of the time and years that they have trained people, that they have helped and they've guided people. They've built curriculum around this, because I'm really curious, and I hope you are too, to see like, how can I get value, strength, and growth out of bad times and not just look at them as bad times and feel regretful for them, for example, or negative. So that was the first thing that stood out for me that I really liked. The next thing that I highlighted in my notes that I'll pull up, and feel free to comment, question, whatever. Anytime, I don't need to be the sage on the stage here. But the other thing that I liked, this is from the sort of the preamble, I guess, to the introduction by Captain Charlie Plumb, who's retired from the U.S. Navy, and he wrote a kind of his own introduction to the book. And one thing that he said that I really like was sort of at the end of his piece. This book, capturing all that Ken and Josh have learned along the way, represents a roadmap to ensure that anyone can harness the age-old power of struggle and not simply survive, but thrive, which is something I've mentioned. Never forget, we only get so many struggles in life. It's a terrible thing to waste any of them. That's a pretty powerful statement. So there's a couple of things there that stood out for me. That this book represents a roadmap. I really like that metaphor, I guess, that this book will be like a roadmap to help me and others learn and navigate and go on a journey of healing, of growth, to get more strength in how we approach things. I thought that was really cool to think of it that way. And I think that's why I decided to split it up into these 8 weeks, is that we're kind of going to take this road together and kind of have this journey together. And hopefully other people join as the weeks come by. So make sure you tell your friends or anybody that you think might benefit from this experience. And then this last sentence, though, that Captain Charlie Plumb wrote, never forget, we only get so many struggles in life. It's a terrible thing to waste any of them. That's like, that is not your typical perspective on struggle, to say that we only get so many, because I'm sure people usually think, I don't want any more. And then to say that there's a terrible thing to waste any of them. That's so awesome to think of it that way, that we are not going to waste these struggles, that we're going to use them to get stronger, to grow, to get wiser, to get more compassionate, more empathy, whatever it happens to be. So I think that was great. And Maureen, thank you. Your comment, I love the book and now use it as a reference book. I have a feeling I'm going to be doing the same thing. So that's great that you use it as a reference book. If you feel like sharing maybe one of the main things that has stood out for you and why it's proved so valuable to you, I would love to hear that. No pressure, of course. I'm not going to pressure anybody into sharing if they don't want to. The next, if I may go on, I'll just read the next note that I highlighted, and this is related to this last little sentence from Charlie Plumb. Struggle can produce profound gifts if you can learn to struggle well. So this is like the title of the book, right? And struggling well, instead of struggling and being buried in that struggle and always being a negative thing for you. This is something I'm so interested in. But the struggle can give gifts, profound gifts, and that you can struggle well. I had a conversation the other day with a man that I used to go, I went on a weekend retreat for like quite a long time ago. It's maybe 7 or 8 years ago. This weekend retreat was for men who had experienced childhood sexual abuse, and it was called a Weekend of Recovery, hosted by Male Survivor. And we became friends from that weekend and helped each other through our journey by talking regularly. And I caught up with him this week to have another conversation about things that have been going on in his life. And we had this conversation about looking at the struggle and the difficulty that happened in like the sexual abuse and other trauma events in our families, and looking at these things as something that we can look back on as assets as opposed to liabilities. And we had a really interesting conversation about that, to think that because of what we've struggled through, what we've had to learn, the new skills we've had to sort of add to our lives, like about self-care, mindfulness, reflection, pausing, journaling, all of these things, that these have actually become gifts for us. We've probably became a little more sensitive, a little maybe more compassionate and empathetic, because when you come from this place of struggle and trauma, I think maybe it might be easier, or sometimes maybe not easier, but you can empathize as opposed to sympathize with others who are struggling as well. Because when people say, you put yourself in other people's shoes, but I can. So that's a very kind of interesting way to think about it, that struggle can produce profound gifts if you learn to struggle well. And this book, of course, will help us learn to struggle well. So I'll continue here to go into the next note that I had. And again, if you have anything that you've highlighted in your book and you want to share, feel free to throw it in the comments there. I'd love to hear. So another one that I highlighted from just the introduction, not even in like a main chapter yet, is you don't learn by only seeing how others have turned struggle into strength. You learn by doing it yourself. So I like this too, because one of the other things that my friend and I talked about the other night was that we are responsible for the reactions that we have. We are responsible for our behavior. And so in how I, for example, love the word no and have boundaries set around what happens in relationships in my life to give myself self-care and to protect myself. If I say no to someone else in protecting my boundaries and their reaction is not good to that, or they give some sort of attitude or passive aggressiveness or whatever, that's their issue. And to be okay with the fact that other people's reactions, behaviors, etc., are not going to always be what we want. We can't force people to react the way we want. So we had to talk about this, how you learn by doing it yourself, that you are responsible for your growth and for making the struggle into something that can be like a gift. I think that's really important because I remember when I was co-facilitating a men's group for men who had been sexually abused, that some of the guys were really frustrated. They're like, why do I have to do all this work and this struggle and have these tears and feel, have this vulnerability be upfront in my life and dig into the shame and all of this stuff? He's like, I didn't ask for that person to abuse me or to hurt me. And there's like some interesting truth there, right? Like, nobody asks for that, especially as a child. You don't ask for that, and you don't know what's going on, and you're not responsible for what happened to you. Somebody did something to you. You didn't, allow that to happen. Same thing with people who are in the military or police officers or firefighters. When these bad things happen during their when they're working, it's not like they asked for that to happen just because they decided to become somebody in the military or police, right? Like things just happen. And so I understand that kind of sentiment where, why do I have to do all this struggle and why do I have to go on this healing journey because this is not my fault? Of course, nope, was not your fault. But again, we are not going to become stronger and we're not going to grow if we don't do this growth, this struggle ourselves, and take on the responsibility of going, okay, my life is here, but I want it to be here. And that in between, I'm the only person that's going to get me there. It's my responsibility to move the needle and take a baby step, maybe every day or once a week, to go a little bit further down the path to a better life, to improving how I respond to things, to improving how I self-regulate, to improving how I treat myself with compassion, for example. So this is our responsibility. So I highlighted that as well because that stood out for me, because although it's very difficult and I've had lots of tears and I've had lots of frustration, it's worth it. I would never want to go back to the way it was before. Even speaking of tears, like this morning, I had some in my journaling session. I needed to show myself some self-compassion in terms of regret over things I'd done in the past and behaviors and ways I'd treated people and things I'd said and the emotional maturity and things that I had thrown at people. And I had some tears when I was writing that down. I was like, wow, I need to be, softer or kinder to myself and not be beating myself up so much about these things that, first of all, are in the past and I can't change. But second of all, just looking at it and going, okay, you were broken, you had trauma happen to you, no one gave you the tools to figure out how to cope, you kind of created your own as a teenager, then these habits kind of stuck with me and I didn't really know what else to do. So giving myself a little bit of leeway and saying, could you have done better? And I remember writing the one thing in my journal this morning that Brene Brown has said, I believe, one of her books, not the talk, but I'm not sure which, where she says we have to believe that everybody is doing the best that they can at the time. And that's difficult for us to think of sometimes, but I believe that that's true, that we have certain tools, we have certain experiences. Everybody has a story. As I like to say, there's a story behind the face. And we just do the best that we can at the time. And we have to accept that that's the truth for other people too, even when they hurt us, even when they're not doing the things that we would want them to do or would wish that they would do or that they would treat us better. We have to be forgiving, I guess, or more compassionate and empathetic, and understand that we fail, they fail, nobody's perfect, basically. So a little bit of a tangent there, but this is what book and learning do, right? It connects dots for you and helps you to see other things. So I'll do a couple more because a few minutes left, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. And again, put in comments whenever you'd like. I thank you for the likes and things that I've been seeing popping up. This is pretty cool to have Facebook Live like this. I like it. And so the one focus of this book, Struggle Well, that Ken and Josh have written is about post-traumatic growth. This idea that some researchers had studied and kind of came up with this theory and this idea because they saw that people who went through really, really difficult, trying times in the military were able to come home and thrive and really have successful lives, and while other people could not and struggled. And so this post-traumatic growth is something I'm very curious about. So in the book, they sometimes call this PTG, G as in good, like my last name. And so here in this other note that I highlighted, making PTG, or post-traumatic growth, happen begins with understanding that everyone struggles. Something I actually just ended up talking about. Bad things happen, but what distinguishes the people who grow and prosper is the fact that they're not afraid to struggle. They embrace struggle because they know it's inevitable and even useful. Struggle can help us achieve the life we want to live. I'm not sure that I really need to say more. That says a lot already. But being okay and understanding that we all struggle, but that the growth and prosper comes from being willing, being brave enough to struggle, to dig into that struggle, to reflect on it, to pause and be with it, as opposed to burying it down all the time and trying to ignore it, which is not helpful for anybody. And then seeing that this can actually be useful. So that's something I thought was really great. And Beverly has just put in a comment. I don't want to ignore comments, so I'm going to check. Being gentle with and forgiving ourselves can be a challenge, but essential. Totally agree. It is a challenge. This morning it was a challenge for me when I was doing my journaling, but I agree it's very essential. It's so interesting. There's the lens that I read. I'm reading a Buddhist book in the morning, and sort of the idea from that, and an idea I got from Kristen Neff's book as well on self-compassion, is to think like, how would you respond to a friend, let's say family member, coworker, who came to you and said they're struggling, they made a mistake, they messed up on something, the boss is gonna like fire them, or you have a son, daughter, brother, sister, whatever, comes to you and explains how they're struggling, how things are difficult. How would you react to them? We are usually very nice to these people. We say, you know, you can do this. Like, and if you need support, I'm there for you. But you're strong enough to do this. You can do it. We tell people it'll be okay. We are, as Beverly says, we are gentle and forgiving with other people, but we're not to ourselves often. We're much nicer to others than we are to ourselves. And I think that's a really nice sort of switch in perspective that I've been doing lately, to think, if I am being so, kind to other people when they tell me they're struggling and they have tough times, shouldn't I do it to myself? And so I really like that. And by the way, after the Struggle Well read along is done on April 10th, the following week I will start another read along with Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion, because it's awesome too. So hopefully this night works for you guys, and if it doesn't, also let me know, because I want to make sure that it will be as good as possible and as accessible to as many people as possible. So I'm almost done, and I'll share the last note that I highlighted just in the introduction, not into the chapters even yet. PTG, so post-traumatic growth again, teaches us that it's what we choose to learn from our struggle that matters. Let's face it, life is going to slap you in the face, maybe even punch you. Yep. You can choose to react negatively, or you can choose to respond positively, turning your struggle into strength. And in my version, the react and the respond are italicized. Probably can't see that, but I think that's important to think about reacting or responding, because so often we just react as opposed to pausing, responding to things that happen to us. And reacting is often emotions first, and the responding is a little more, reflection, brain involved. So I really like this, that it's that we choose to learn from our struggle, and that life is going to slap us, punch us in the face, and do we react or do we respond? And it's a very different lens to put on that. So I hope this was good for you and helpful. I appreciate those who have commented, Anna, Maureen, Beverly, and those who have watched. I keep seeing the number kind of change, and I'm trying to stay focused so not pay too much attention to that. But it's nice to see. This will be recorded, and I will post it. So if you're watching after, you can still comment. I will still see them and still respond. And again, as I said, Ken and Josh are fully supporting this, the co-authors of the book. And if you ever have questions for them, I'll make sure I pass them over to Ken and Josh. And when I get the answers, I will share them in the subsequent live broadcasts. So as I said, next week, same time, same place, I am going to, Beverly says Wednesday night works for me, great. And again, if one of the nights doesn't work for you, these are always recorded, so the recordings will be available as well. So next week, we're going to dig into chapter 1. So hopefully you have time between now and next week to read chapter 1 or reread it if you've read it before. If you haven't got the book, hopefully you can pick it up before then, and we'll dig into the first chapter and see the gems that it has to share, what we can learn from it, what we can reflect on, and hopefully share with each other and learn as we go, and be a nice supporting community to each other while we, as the book says, learn how to grow and struggle well. So again, thanks very much wherever you happen to be in the world. I am near Toronto, Ontario, Canada, by the way. Very cold outside, so nice and warm in here. Nice picture of Greece there behind me where it was nice and warm a couple summers ago. So I look forward to seeing you next week. I really appreciate you joining in. Tell your friends, anyone you think might benefit from digging into a book this valuable. And I got to thank Ken and Josh as well for allowing me to do this. So have a good night, everybody. And I guess I will say, struggle well. Cheers.